Since 2015, Jared Stillman has rocked Nashville sports.
That team freaking stinks.
And now he's back. The takes are hotter than ever.
I mean, let's be honest, he just can't coach.
Welcome to Stillman and Company.
Stillman and Company of the 440 Sports Network, a special, I want to say, breaking news edition of the Stillman and Company program. I mean, just when I thought I was out, they pulled me back in. The New York Post has released new photos featuring Mike Vrabel and Dianna Russini's weekend at the Ambiente Hotel, and we will get into all of that. Plus, there is one thing that I absolutely have got to go insane on. It has nothing to do with the story, but it pissed me off in general, and then when given the opportunity to go off on it, I've decided I'm going to do that. So we will get into all of that. This is going to be a quick little reaction show, and again, a reminder, tomorrow, 6 o'clock. So 24 hours from now, the draft will be in the middle of round one, and we will be live right here on the Stillman & Company program. Chris Childers and I breaking down the draft. And boy, the draft cannot come fast enough for old Mike Vrabel and Dianna Russini. So I was actually kind of stunned by all of this. I mean, again, I say stunned. I was stunned by the fact that there are new photos that came out in the New York Post. But first, I want to tell you about our presenting sponsor. That's Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. They take great care of my home. They can do the exact same for you. I love Hiller. Again, anytime I've got an issue, I go right to Hiller because they take great care of my home. They can do the exact same for you. Happy you will be, or the service is free. Go to happyhiller.com. That's where I book any of my HVAC appointments, or if I'm doing something like when I put lights here into the home studio. How do we do it? We had Hiller come on out to the house. They are fabulous. That's Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. Proud supporters of the Preds, the Vols, and Vandy. That's Hiller. Call the Happy Face Drive today. TDG says, what are we doing, Jared? What do you mean, what are we doing, Jared? We are getting into the nitty-gritty of this. So, after today's Stillman & Company, I went to go pick my son up from school. And then we went out to dinner. And then all of a sudden, Twitter starts blowing up. And people are telling me there are new pictures of Vrabel and Rousini. And I'm not going to lie, I kind of took the bait. I saw the new pictures and I thought, what are they? And so I looked through them. And I'm going to throw them up here on the screen right now. If you're watching the stream on YouTube right now, you see on the left-hand side, these are the new pictures. And there's like 4 of them like this, where you can see a blurred out image of Dianna sitting with somebody eating breakfast. Now, according to page 6, and I'm going to read this verbatim because I don't want to get sued and I don't want to get anything wrong. So, according to page 6, Vrabel and Rousini were spotted having breakfast together during the outing at the Ambiente Resort in new exclusive photos, again, obtained by page 6. An insider told us, New York Post, that the pair, who are both married to other people, dined together on the morning of March 28th around 10:15 local time. I want to stop it right there for a second. You know what? I'm not going to stop right there. I'm going to continue on, and then I'm going to stop it, and I'm going to give you my take. Multiple eyewitnesses claimed that the two dined alone, which seemed to be supported by the pictures we obtained. But sources close to Russini insist that the sports reporter and the NFL coach were joined by a group of friends for their morning meal. I don't know how anybody can believe that at this point in time. The insider also told us, again, this is page 6, that the pair appeared to be trying to go incognito by walking to various places in the resort separately throughout the day following their breakfast. Quote, one of them would go ahead and then the other would wait for a few seconds and then they would follow a few steps ahead, the source alleged, claiming that it seemed as if they didn't want to be seen walking together. So, again, that tells us that Vrabel and Rousini, that they knew what they were doing was wrong. But they knew that the whole time. Now, I put the second picture up here on the right, if you're looking at this, because I guess this is an old photo. I mean, I saw the photo of them sitting in the hot tub together. I saw the picture of them in the pool where they're in those really nice loungers that are on the front step. I did not see this with Vrabel's back and Russini apparently in a one-piece. The whole time I thought she was wearing a bikini. Russini in a one-piece and them in the pool, whatever. So I guess that, again, the picture on the left, that's the new photo. So I think there are two things at play here. Number one, and this is my first question with all of this. How did the New York Post get the second photos? The second batch of photos? Like, what is it with the New York Post and this story? That's the first thing. The second thing is this really new information at this point? Now, people have told me for years that I do things for clicks. And until September of last year, I never really did anything for clicks. I always followed what people were saying on Twitter, and I always wanted more Twitter followers or whatever it may be, but I wasn't doing things to get clicks so that then I could get money. Now I kind of do that because, again, this is a digital show and you're defined by how many people are clicking on stuff. So there is an element of that. The New York Post is a tabloid. And for years, the New York Post has been about selling newspapers or getting clicks. When it comes to the New York Post releasing these photos, they did it on the eve of the NFL draft, 24 hours from now. And this Vrabel and Rousini story, it's the biggest story in football. It's been the biggest story in football for the last 2 weeks. 24 hours from now, not one person who gives a fuck about this story who's not related to Dianna Russini or Mike Vrabel is going to give a rat's ass because we're going to be on to the NFL draft. And I think Vrabel is probably sitting there thinking to himself, please get here Thursday. Now, Vrabel is going to have to do a press conference tomorrow. And I think Vrabel is going to get asked at the press conference tomorrow about these new photos. And he can't really do the I talked about this earlier in the week kind of thing. But I think that the New York Post released these photos because they wanted to double up on the story. Again, I'm operating off of what somebody told me. And this went absolutely viral last week when I said that a source close to Dianna told me that the source believed that those photos were obtained by a private investigator hired by Dianna Russini's husband. That's what the source thinks. And I've been convinced the entire time that this is a private investigator. And I certainly haven't backed down whatsoever on any of those claims. Clearly, this was a private investigator. I mean, look at the photo of Dianna on the left. The new photos, again, just put it up on the stream. That looks like something I'd see out of a movie when the FBI is following somebody around. Oh, yeah. We caught Sonny Corleone out there with Luca Brasi and I don't know, one of the Barzini guys. I don't know. That is what looks like FBI pictures out of a movie. So I think it was a private investigator. I think we can probably, for the most part, all agree on that. I think the New York Post, when they released the Vrabel-Rousini story 2 weeks ago, I don't think they thought it was going to blow up the way it has. I didn't think it was going to blow up the way it had. I mean, somebody in the local press sent me, the local national press, sent me the original New York Post story about Vrabel and Russini together and then said, enjoy. And that was like a way of saying, ha ha, I know you've been talking about these two forever. Ha ha, you're this one's so funny. But I didn't think this was going to be something we'd be talking about for 3 weeks. I mean, the story is 2 weeks old. And the clicks and the interest in the story are outrageous. ESPN didn't want to touch us with a 10-foot pole. The capital J journo said that this was all beneath them. But the New York Post just got click and impression after click and impression. And now I think the New York Post is going for a double dip. And in fairness, they got clicks out of me. So I think the New York Post put this out there just to basically double dip, to bring this story back out there, to get more people to click on it, to get more people to talk about it. Let me just say this. Is there any new information in these new New York Post photos? Don't we already know what happened? I mean, we all say allegedly and things like that to not get sued. And so I want to say that I don't know what happened, but I think I know what happened. And when it comes to what I feel like I know happened is I feel like they were having an affair. I think you feel that way, and I certainly feel that way. So what does this picture of Dianna sitting with somebody at breakfast, what does that do that changes anybody's opinion? And not only is that already everybody's opinion, Dianna came out last week and put out a statement, and not one person in the United States of America believed that statement. Vrabel came out yesterday, and in my opinion, he admitted it. So I don't think Vrabel, went on the record and said, I did it. But Vrabel did not get up there and say, I did not have sexual relations with that woman. Vrabel got up there and he said, I've let a lot of people down. I've had to have tough conversations with people I care about. Personal and private matter. Vrabel pled no contest yesterday. He didn't say it, but he said it. So these new photos, they don't do anything. We already knew that they were having an affair, at least in the sense that everybody assumes that it's true. And Vrabel did nothing to put out that fire yesterday. I also thought about this, which is Vrabel and Dianna at the Ambiente Resort. Vrabel and Dianna at the Ambiente Resort having breakfast with one another out there on the patio. Now, again, the Ambiente Resort is a romance resort. In fact, I heard somebody say that it is a big, and this is what somebody else said, not me, it is a big mistress resort. So apparently what happens is these guys in Hollywood all go from LA out to Arizona, and you have the beautiful surroundings and everything else. And it's very private. It's very getaway-ish. So, again, going back to the duck theory, even if these were two sources that were just meeting for talking football, then that is actually kind of normal. I mean, it's not normal because it's the Ambiente at a couples resort, but Vrabel and Dianna going out to breakfast, in all seriousness, that is a fair relationship between a source and a subject, or a source and a reporter. It's like, yeah, let's go grab coffee. Let's go grab a meal. Let's sit down and talk about this. The owners' meetings are coming up. You're my source. I don't want anybody to know. So we're going to go far away and we're going to sit there and have breakfast. So that actually could be kosher. If those were the photos that came out first, and the interlocking fingers and the romantic view and the hot tub, if that wasn't first, but the first was just those two eating a meal, I don't think anybody would say anything about it. So I think this is a cheap grab by the New York Post to try to drop another story to get more people to click on it and to have people keep talking about it, because this thing has exploded. So that's kind of the first thing here. The second thing, and I have felt this way the entire time. As soon as I decided that I thought it was a PI, and then I had the source close to Dianna tell me that they, beyond the shadow of a doubt, and I'm saying they as in the source, not Dianna. I don't know what Dianna thinks. Trust me, Dianna ain't talking to me. But that person believes it was a PI beyond a shadow of a doubt. Once I heard that, I thought to myself, yeah, there's more there. This was more of a warning shot across the bow than it was anything else. And I also wonder if the New York Post paid for those first group of photos and came back and said, please give us some more photos. And they said, okay, I'll give you these photos. Because again, these photos are rather harmless. It's just them eating breakfast together. That's it. Again, you could argue that that is a source and writer relationship. But I think there are more photos in the kitty. And I don't know if the New York Post has them and is just waiting to drop them like a nuclear warhead, or if the source that the Post is getting them from, which again, I think is the private investigator, if he has them and is like, no, these stay in the vault. But as far as the new photos, I just don't know if those are that big of a deal. And the other thing is, we already know. Again, we don't know, but we know. They were having an affair. That's why Vrabel got up there and he didn't deny it. Now, she's denied it twice, and neither time, I don't think anybody believed her. But especially the second time, I don't think anybody believed her. And I guess that takes me to my final thing here, which may not be great coming from me. And then I'll address some of the comments in the comment section. And then I'll go on my little just mini rant. But when it comes to Vrabel and Dianna, how much more of this do they need to go through? And as I said, this may sound a little hypocritical because I have absolutely leaned into this story. I have ran with it. I have done interviews. I have celebrated being in Us Weekly talking about Vrabel and Dianna. But when is it enough? She resigned. She's out of the game right now for however long, probably forever. She's out of the game. She wrote in her statement that she didn't want this to define her professionally. It already has. Vrabel got up there, and I'm not going to defend Vrabel with what I said because everybody's ripping Vrabel for not admitting to anything and for not answering any of the questions yesterday when in that sidebar he was asked directly about them. I feel like because I know Vrabel and I know Vrabelese, he admitted to it yesterday. The way that I decode what he says, he told you without telling you. And he's never going to tell you, so just accept it. So how much more of this do they have to go through? Like, how much more do Vrabel and Dianna have to go through when I don't think they thought, I don't think the New York Times thought, I don't think the Patriots thought, I don't think the New York Post thought, I don't think I thought this was going to become a 3-week story. Like at some point, if there's not something else that's massive, like at some point, shouldn't this kind of go away? Now, if there's something that's massive there, that's a different discussion. But what are we looking for? One person says, I'm a new subscriber. Thank you. Welcome. You know what? When you're a new subscriber, then I think that we, for a new subscriber, got to go. These friends of theirs are ghosts. You know, I was a little surprised when I read in the New York Post story tonight that dropped that Sources close to Russini still argue that she was there on a girls' trip. If she was there on a girls' trip, we'd be seeing girls' trip pictures 2 weeks ago. When she said she was on a girls' trip and that came out, number one, I didn't believe them at all because I had my suspicions about Vrabel and Rousini going all the way back to 2022. But when she said I was hiking on a girls' trip, I figured we were at least going to see some, I figured there was at least a little bit of truth in that. Not zero truth. I also didn't know that the resort was this unbelievably romantic resort for couples. So TDG says this should be over. It's run its course. But the Pablo Torre story is going to reopen stuff. And TDG also said that the Pablo Torre story has not been released yet. So here's where we're going to see about Pablo Torre. And I saw Pablo Torre put out on Twitter last week because somebody said, where's Pablo Torre when you need him to go in on these things? And Pablo Torre tweeted out and said, I am making phone calls right now. Well, you do know who owns Pablo Torre's podcast, right? The Athletic does. So, I don't know if Pablo went to them when they signed him after his stuff went viral and they said, hey, we want you to do this. I don't know if Pablo Torre was like, hey, if you want me, then you're going to get the whole truth, the full truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. And that the Athletic and the New York Times will just have to suck it up and have Pablo put out a story that makes him look really, really bad. But I wouldn't bet on it. And I say this with all due respect to Pablo. We all have bosses. Pablo's bosses may say, hey, man, she doesn't work here anymore. Vrabel's already half admitted it. Let's move on. Maybe Pablo will have a bombshell, but I kind of doubt it just because Pablo works for The Athletic. Billy says, new here also. Okay, let's go ahead and give Billy the gong. Billy says, new here also. Nothing like a husband who's been dragged around have the tide turn. I'll say this. Her husband, after all those clips came out, and I don't know how many times she got caught talking shit about him on different radio shows and different podcasts and different Get Up, everything. I don't know how many times she did that, but whoa. I mean, I think he got a lot. I think he got a lot of sympathy from a lot of people who don't even know him because of those clips, which I think is pretty crazy. Joe says Dianna lied to her bosses at The Athletic. Right, but we already know that. So I don't think that they would. That's just me. I don't think they want to. I think The Athletic and the Times wants us to go away too. Adam Vingan enters the chat. Maybe he's a new subscriber too. Let's get a. I bet Adam thinks he's too good to subscribe. Let's get a for Adam Vingan. How much more do they have to go through? You're doing an impromptu show at 8:08 at night. Again, I didn't put the photos out there. I'm just reacting to them. Like, if I was the New York Post and I was run like the New York Post, I would say we're going to publish the photos because I do think that is, their business. Just like this show is my business. But I do wonder, at some point, don't we all look at this and say, we know what it was? Like if somebody were to come out today and say, oh my God, there's another Linda Tripp tape that has Bill Clinton or has Monica Lewinsky talking about Bill Clinton. Would any of you give a shit about that? And keep in mind that Clinton and Lewinsky was like this times a billion. But if now that we know the story, now that Monica Lewinsky's written a book, Bill Clinton's written a book, Bill Clinton's admitted to it, Monica Lewinsky's done every interview under the sun, would you really care if there was another Linda Tripp tape? Aaron says, yes, we would. George says Clay still doesn't buy the spouse has hired a PI. He thinks an NFL team is behind this. Clay Travis? Again, I just told you what Dianna's. Try to read what it says. A source close to Dianna told me. And the source close to Dianna told me they think it's a PI. They think it was the husband. What does another NFL team have to get out of this? The only team that I could see pulling this is the Jets, because Dianna has written so much shit about the Jets, and Woody Johnson is a total nutbag, and he's got the means to be able to do something like this and laugh about it. And plus, I mean, again, we hear story after story. Most of them come from Dianna, but we've heard story after story about how nuts Woody Johnson is. So maybe it could be the Jets. But like, if you owned the Chicago Bears, do you really give a rat's ass about Vrabel and Dianna? Even if you're the Buffalo Bills, do you really give a rat's ass about Vrabel and Dianna? Cedric. I've talked to Cedric in a while. Cedric says, Coach Meathead. Always used to call in about Coach Meathead. Coach Meathead was thinking with the meathead, and I fucking love it. Here's where I'm going to just defend Vrabel and Dianna's affair, if I may. Vrabel and Dianna went to a resort that is an exclusive couples-only resort, no kids allowed. It's a very small resort. It's very private. It's very exclusive. And it's 2 hours out of town from where everybody else was going to be. Normally, when people get caught cheating, it's usually because of something stupid. It's like, I mean, he had his phone out and there was naked pictures on there of the people, and I knew he was cheating on me. You know, like when I used to watch the Jerry Springer show back in the day, that's what it used to be like. That Vrabel and Dianna, this was incredibly well planned. The only thing is there must have been a booking confirmation, a credit card, a something where somebody saw that they would be at the Ambiente Hotel. Because if you didn't know they were going to be at the Ambiente Hotel, there's no way you could have got this intel. The only meat left on the bone of this that I want to know about is I want to know what other pictures we got. Because I do think there may be some more. One person says it's not new information, Jared. Of course it isn't. Someone doesn't want the story to die, and that's why the photos were released. I think the New York Post doesn't want the story to die, because the New York Post has been having a field day. And again, I said this earlier today in reference to the fact that Rexroad came on the show and made himself look so stupid. And I love Joe. And I'd say this to Joe's face, but he came on the show yesterday and he made himself look like he had buried his head 8 feet into the sand. Kaharski, we played the cut of him basically being like, I didn't think this was a big enough deal for me to do anything special about it. I'll just come on, talk about it for 3 minutes, get to play bettingfield.football. And then Greg Bedard yesterday absolutely losing his shit with Mike Felger about how he's like, this isn't a story. You just need something to talk about. So this is why you do it. And I'm like, that could have been the case in 2010, where if the Greg Bedards and the Joe Rexroads and the Paul Kaharskis of the world, and I think at this time, I want to say Bedard might have been at the Boston Globe. Kaharski was at ESPN. Rexroad was at the Detroit Free Press. I mean, these guys had juice, and they still do. But these guys had juice back then. And social media wasn't as rampant as it is today. And podcasting and just, hey, here are my thoughts directly. They don't have to go through an NBC. They don't have to go through an ABC. They don't have to go through a CBS. They just, boom, here you go. It's a different era. And this story, I think, is proof of that, because there were so many people, and I hate saying this because I feel like Sean Hannity when I say this, the mainstream media, but there were so many people in the media business that were like, nah, not worth my time. One person says, Mike is dumb. Not only did he cheat, he downgraded. Have y'all seen the pics of Mike's wife? She's a very attractive woman compared to the... I'll say this. First of all, I've met Mike's wife one time. She was very lovely. The one time I met her. Diana's not ugly, guys. When I hear people say things like, Diana's not even good looking, I'm like, okay. One person said, bring your buddy from Playboy magazine back. Who's that? So this I actually believe. This one person says, guaranteed this photographer has a kissing photo when they were interlocking hands, and that's the nuke. I think so too. I don't know that. And trust me, if there was a photo of them kissing, I mean, we'd be on for a lot longer than 30 minutes. I mean, we'd be on for a long time tonight if there was a picture of them kissing. I have thought the entire time that this was a PI and there was more to it. I truly thought that once it was obvious that Dianna couldn't produce the girls on the girls' trip, and I already knew what I thought of Vrabel and Rousini's relationship from when he was the coach here of the Titans. And I pretty much feel like Dianna knew that I thought that too. I mean, with this really awkward exchange, she's very, very nice in person. With this very awkward exchange at training camp with the joint practices between the Titans and the Vikings. And I mean, I think Dianna knew what I was putting down, but whatever. I already know what I thought. But when I saw these photos and then I saw the one photo with the giant red rocks in the background, and I'm like, that's not an iPhone that took that picture. That is a fucking legitimate FBI PI camera. I think absolutely there is a picture of them doing more than canoodling. I don't think that there's like anything inside the bedroom, but I definitely think there's a picture of them doing more than canoodling. And I think that's the nuke. You know, the one thing that I don't understand, though, in this New York Post story, where it says, quote, the insider also told us the pair appeared to be trying to go incognito by walking to various places in the resort separately throughout the day following their breakfast. And we saw those photos in the original story where it showed Dianna leaving the pool, and then it showed Vrabel with his hoodie on and holding his shoes leaving the pool. If Vrabel and Dianna are like, okay, you go first and then I'll go later, then didn't they have to think that somebody might be onto them? Like, we're going to get in a hot tub together, but we're not going to walk together? Am I the only one that's like, what? Why do you need that? One person says, I bet there's a photo of them leaving the same bedroom. If I was a betting man, I would put money on that not being the case. Well, wait a minute. Time out. The way the Ambiente works, I want you guys to understand this because I actually did some studying of the Ambiente. I actually thought when we were in Arizona last week for Caroline's wedding, I thought about booking a hotel at the Ambiente and doing a show from the Ambiente and then kind of like walking around with my phone, be like, okay, this is this room and this is that room. And in hindsight, I probably wish I had done that. So the way this works, in my understanding of it, I'm going to try to draw a picture here and put it on the stream. So these rooms are these atrium rooms. There's 40 rooms at the Ambiente. And when I looked it up, there's like a $1,500 room and then like a $3,000 room. And I think they were staying in the $3,000 rooms. So this right here, if you're looking at the stream, I've got these little boxes. This is like each room at the hotel. So the picture of them on the rooftop, I believe, was from one of these. So like, let's say like right here. Well, then that would mean that by default, they would have to leave the same hotel room. So when you say that there's going to be a picture of them leaving the same hotel room, I think that we already have the picture of them in the same hotel room. And that's the picture of the interlocking hands on the rooftop of the bungalow at the Ambiente, where there's only like 10 of those, and they're incredibly expensive and incredibly, highfalutin. So I think we already have that. TDG says, come on, Jared. TDG, if you're going to say, come on, Jared, I need some sort of explanation on why are we saying, come on, Jared? Like, what is that? I need some context. Kurt says, the PI has to provide absolute proof, and they haven't. I don't know, man. Like, I would feel pretty good about the fact that there's absolute proof. Again, I don't know this for a fact. They had to have kissed on that rooftop, right? They had to have kissed there. One person says draft show tomorrow. Yes, 6 o'clock. Chris Childers from SiriusXM College Sports Radio will be co-hosting with me. They had to. For whatever that's worth. Okay. Can I get to my one quick little rant here? If I can for a second. Because this isn't going to make the show tomorrow, but it's making me mad right now. It's making me mad today. Talk about a huge news dump. Hold on. Let me read the Florio story first. Apparently Florio has a story out here. The New York Post publishes more photos of Mike Vrabel and Dianna Russini at adults-only resort in Sedona, Arizona. Boy, Florio, you talk about playing the game. And I know that one clip of Florio telling Chris Sims to stay on target kind of went viral. But, man, Florio is playing the game on this because he's all over it. But he's also, like, he's keeping himself out of trouble. Okay. Florio writes at Pro Football Talk, quote, the publication by the New York Post of photos showing Patriots coach Mike Vrabel with former athletic reporter Dianna Russini always carried the subtle implication that there could be more. Now there are. The Post has produced images that purport to show Vrabel and Russini having breakfast at the same adults-only resort in Sedona, Arizona, at which the initial photos were taken. The new images don't carry nearly the same weight as the first wave. Coupled with reporting from the Post, these photos show two having breakfast in the morning of Saturday, March 28th. Again, like I said, having breakfast, to me, that is typical source and reporter type of connection. It is funny. I think I've told this story before. I tell so many stories, and I've already told so many stories about everything that I can't remember what I tell on the air or off the air. But 2022, and I want to say this was around the bye week of 22, they went to Washington. They played the Commanders, and I don't know if you guys remember this. Carson Wentz threw an interception right there at the goal line at the end of the game. David Long Jr. picked it off. The Titans were for sure going to lose. David Long had this great interception. Titans beat the Commanders. It was one of those games where Derrick Henry and Jeffrey Simmons just went nuts. So after that game, there was this huge story in ESPN, a bombshell about Dan Snyder. And I was at Nashville Deli out there in Green Hills. And I was just eating breakfast, reading the story. And I was in my own little world. And there was a man and a woman in a booth over next to me. And at the end of their breakfast or whatever, again, I paid no attention to it. But I was just sitting there, reading my story and eating my bagel. And I turned over and I see these two people hugging. And it was Vrabel and his wife. So this was 2022. This was Vrabel and his wife. And they had this big hug, and then Vrabel and I kind of acknowledged, hey, how you doing? Good to see you. Good luck. Congratulations. Blah, blah, blah. So, having breakfast for whatever that's worth. Kurt says, please, Lord, make this happen. The Pats are ready to turn in the pick, and ESPN drops the kissing photo. ESPN? Kurt! Have you been following this story? ESPN. ESPN can't get as far away from this story as they'd like. ESPN. I love how Joe Rexrode and Paul Kaharski today were talking about the ESPN story that the Ben Strauss wrote. He's got 8,000 Twitter followers. They just hired him from the Washington Post. He published a story at 2 o'clock on Friday. ESPN did not have the push notification go out until 5 p.m. Schefter's over here retweeting and reposting everybody. This morning, Schefter reposted Mel Kiper, Field Yates, Brooke Pryor, Mike Reese. Like, all these different people had stories, and Schefter's like, story by Mike Reese. But this guy writes a story, Schefter completely ignores it. The ESPN Twitter completely ignores it. ESPN wants nothing to do with this story. And the fact that Joe and Paul, two newspaper guys, are pretending like the Friday news dump is not a thing is just ridiculous. ESPN. Let me say this. If the New York Post drops that on draft night, and again, the New York Post is owned by Rupert Murdoch, who also owns Fox. Fox's America's Game of the Week next year is going to be a lot of Jacksonville Jaguars and Tennessee Titans and Carolina Panthers. You're going to see a lot of Tom Brady calling the Arizona Cardinals. Tom Brady, Kevin Burkhardt, 3:25 on Fox. This game goes to the entire country. It's a thriller between Bryce Young and the Carolina Panthers and Jacoby Brissett and the Arizona Cardinals. It's America's Game of the Week. Meanwhile, CBS is showing Buffalo and Baltimore. I think they know don't ruin the draft. I think that's one thing they say, hey. One person says the crazy thing, this cover-up is like a government cover-up. Why are people trying to ignore it and bury it? It's super weird. So I think the insiders are staying out of this for the most part because they don't want how they do their own business exposed. And I don't know how they do their own business. I've never been an insider. I've always known there's some kind of quid pro quo. Adam Schefter is not going to go on SportsCenter and say, well, Hannah Storm, I think Jerry Jones needs to resign and retire because he is a terrible general manager. Even though we know Jerry Jones is a terrible general manager. So I think that's why the insiders are staying away from it. I think the league's broadcast partners. Now, again, the Today Show talked about it today. That's NBC. The New York Post, owned by Fox, or I should say owned by Rupert Murdoch, who also owns Fox. That is a league broadcast partner. But I think the league broadcast partners are so afraid of the NFL getting mad about this, and I'm not convinced the NFL is mad about this. But I think that they are so afraid of the league giving them the Panthers and the Jags because of what happened with playmakers in 2003 that they really don't want to touch this. I don't think there's some sort of government conspiracy behind this. This is kind of insane, though. George says Daniel Jeremiah has the Titans taking Styles over Love. Yeah, well, Daniel Jeremiah also had the Chargers taking J.C. Latham over Joe Alton. We all saw how that went down. Woo! Aaron says, Joe is seething seeing Dianna in a bikini with the dreaded Mike Vrabel. It's not a bikini. It was a one-piece. And I don't know what Joe Rexrode would have to say to that. Maybe one of you should call into his show tomorrow and say, Joe, what do you think about the new pictures? Again, I don't really think the new pictures do all that much. But that's just me. Kurt says, thoughts on the Rams trade. What'd the Rams trade? Do we have a Rams trade? If we have a Rams trade, I haven't gotten it. Let's see. Yeah, I don't know. I didn't know there was a Rams trade. What are we talking about here? Oh, someone said rumors. We'll worry about that when it comes down. That's why we're going to be on at 6 o'clock tomorrow instead of on at 7 o'clock when the draft starts, because we will be discussing all of the rumors and everything else. Okay, here's my rant that I want to get into. And I want to get into this because I think this whole thing in general bothers me. So I was just on Twitter, like I think most people are, just kind of perusing the news. And I saw that On3 had reported that Alabama was signing Kalen DeBoer to a new contract. So this came down 5 hours ago. And I read that and I thought, why? Kalen DeBoer, look at his resume, his record. He's a great coach. At Alabama, he kind of sucks. And he kind of sucks by Alabama standards. And when you take that job, you know you're going to be compared to Nick Saban. So they lose to Vanderbilt, and they don't make the playoff in the first year. They make the playoff. They lose the SEC championship game, and they lose that game in the playoff against Indiana by 80. Like, that's not Alabama standards. When they got smoked by Florida State, I said, okay, this ain't going to work. According to Brett McMurphy, Alabama would owe Kalen DeBoer $67.5 million if they fired him without cause. Am I the person who has to step in here and has to say, are you kidding me? Now, I don't know what DeBoer's buyout was before this. I'm sure it was high, but I don't think it was $67 million. What has Kalen DeBoer done at Alabama to justify signing him to a contract extension? And the answer is nothing. So why did they do this? And I don't care if you're an NFL team and you sign a crappy coach to an extension, that's your problem. Because you, the owner, sign him to the extension. You, the owner, have to pay for it when it's time to get rid of the coach. But when you're a college, you do get funded by the state. I think it was that crazy governor of Louisiana that when they fired Brian Kelly was like, we are not going to have the taxpayers holding the bag on this stuff anymore. And then they signed Lane Kiffin to an even worse contract. So he kind of, didn't back up what he was. But I do believe when it comes to college sports, like, we don't need to be paying these coaches all this money, do we? And so when you're Kurt Signetti, you can name your price. But Kalen DeBoer's not Kurt Signetti. This is Alabama. It's 2 years, no titles. He doesn't even have a winning record in the playoff. He's 50-50 at making the playoff. What are we doing here? What are we doing? Why is Alabama paying Kalen DeBoer all this money? Kalen DeBoer doesn't deserve a contract extension. Here's the deal with college football. There are 3 things you can do with a coach. You can extend the coach, you can fire the coach, or you can keep the coach on the contract they already have. The way I look at it is if you do a good enough job to deserve an extension, or if there is a job offer somewhere else, so you get that matched in the form of an extension, fine. And if you stink, you're fired. And you can go onto the beach with Jimbo Fisher and Ed Orgeron and go hang out. But far too often, these schools extend coaches when they don't need to extend coaches because for some reason, some agent convinces them or some message board guru convinces them or something that makes them say, I've got to lock up my coach today. I remember when Jeremy Pruitt signed his extension, and I go, wait, what are we doing here? He's doing an okay job at Tennessee, so he shouldn't be fired. He should just. And people said, no, Jared, you don't understand. Fulmer is committing to his guy, and he's. And a year later, they fired. And again, these coaches, you can sign them to whatever contract you want. If they want to go somewhere else, they will. Lane Kiffin just did that. It is fiscally irresponsible. And it is, from a football sense, illogical for Alabama to extend Kalen DeBoer. Because I guarantee you, and again, this is a public university, I guarantee you that if I was an Alabama resident and we had a vote, we had a referendum, do you agree to using tax dollars for our public university to give Kalen DeBoer a raise? The people of Alabama would vote no based on the results. If it was Saban, they'd say yes. But Saban wins championships. Kalen DeBoer lost to Vanderbilt. What are we doing here? And I think somebody's got to call it out, because I think Alabama snuck that in there the Thursday before the draft because they knew. Why are you doing this? So that was my rant on that. All right, like and subscribe. Draft show tomorrow, 6 o'clock. Chris Childers with us. And of course, the Titans picking at 4. Stillman and Company. We'll see.